A split-second mistake at a crosswalk, a blind woman reaching for the wrong arm, a single father's surprise, and his daughter's innocent question unraveled three separate lives and wove them into one family. This is how the smallest accident of touch can rewrite every plan you ever made, and why sometimes the person you least expect becomes the guide you needed most. Her name was Alina, a woman whose world was built on sound and touch, navigating the city with her white cane. His name was David, a father learning to rebuild a life for his daughter, Chloe, after his marriage ended. In that moment of mistaken identity, three lonely trajectories collided. This is the story of what happened after the light turned green, and why the most profound connections often begin with a simple, terrifying question: what happens now? To understand why that accidental touch held such seismic force, you need to understand the three lives orbiting their own private grief before that Saturday. For Alina, blindness wasn't a tragedy, it was her reality, a world mapped through echo, texture, and memory. She lost her sight at 19 to a degenerative condition, a slow fade to black that stole colors first, then shapes, then light itself. What remained was a fierce independence, hard-won through years of orientation and mobility training. Her white cane wasn't a symbol of limitation, but a tool of freedom, its tip tapping a rapid sonar against concrete, detecting curbs, poles, and open space. She had built a life of meticulous routine, her apartment organized with military precision, her commute to the music conservatory where she worked as a transcriptionist memorized to the number of steps. But the cane had a social cost. Studies show its visibility leads many to avoid using it, fearing stigma. For Alina, the greater fear was the assumption of helplessness. She navigated a world where people either stared or pointedly looked away, where offers of help felt like pity, and where true connection seemed to require more explanation than she had energy to give. David's world had collapsed in a different shade of quiet. The divorce from his wife, Sarah, was finalized 8 months prior, a civil uncoupling that felt like a slow bleed. Joint custody meant he saw his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, every other weekend and Wednesday nights. He was one of over 3 million single fathers in America, a number that has grown ninefold since the 1960s. But statistics didn't capture the hollow ache of compressing a week's worth of fatherhood into scattered hours. His identity had been tied to being a husband and a father in one home. Now, he was a weekend dad in a too-quiet one-bedroom apartment, trying to build new rituals from the rubble. His career as a graphic designer provided stability, but the silence between Chloe's visits was a presence all its own. He felt the pressure to be the fun parent, to make their limited time perfect, all while shielding Chloe from the grief he carried like a stone in his pocket. And Chloe at 6 was a seismograph for adult emotions. She noticed everything: the way her dad smiled didn't always reach his eyes, the careful tones her parents used on phone calls. She drew family portraits with 3 people, then carefully erased one, leaving a ghostly smudge on the paper. She missed the noise of a full house, the uncomplicated belonging of before. Her love for her dad was fierce and protective, a bright, warm constant in her shifting world. Their Saturday morning ritual was David's anchor. Every other week, he and Chloe would go to the Griddle, a bustling diner on the west side. It was their place, no history with her mom, no memories to tiptoe around. The plan that fateful day was simple: pancakes, then a walk to the city park. Chloe, holding David's hand, chattered about a frog documentary, her small voice cutting through the urban hum. David was only half listening, his mind on work deadlines and the impending goodbye that afternoon when he'd return Chloe to her mom's. He was thinking about the loneliness waiting for him in his empty apartment, the silence that felt louder than the busy street. Alina was running late. Her tactile watch confirmed it. Her Saturday routine involved a specific coffee shop across town, but her usual bus was detoured. She decided to walk a new route, her cane sweeping in a rhythmic arc, building a mental map of unfamiliar sidewalk seams and grating textures. She approached a busy multi-lane crosswalk, the traffic noise a chaotic symphony. She waited for the parallel surge of engines that signaled the light had changed for the crossing traffic, then listened for the lull. When the soundscape shifted to idle, she heard the steady asterisk tap-tap-tap of another cane user to her left, starting to cross. Perfect. A moving guide. She fell in step slightly behind and to the right, using the sound of the other cane as a pilot signal through the intersection. But the other cane user turned right at the median. Alina, committed to her straight path, suddenly felt acoustically adrift in the middle of the crossing. The traffic sounds became a confusing wall, a spike of anxiety had she misjudged. Instinctively, her free hand reached out toward where she believed a steadying presence might be. Her fingers closed not around the expected arm of a fellow cane user, but around the firm, warm forearm of David, who was standing still, waiting for Chloe to tie her shoe. The shock was mutual and instantaneous. David looked down, startled by the sudden, firm grip. He saw a young woman in dark glasses, her face a mask of focused confusion, her other hand gripping a white cane. Chloe stopped mid-sentence, looking up at the woman, then at her dad's arm, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I'm so sorry," Alina said, her voice tight with embarrassment as she quickly released her grip. "I thought you were. I was following the sound of another cane." David, recovering from his surprise, saw the deep flush on her cheeks. He knew enough to understand the cardinal rule: you never grab a blind person's cane or arm unasked. But she had grabbed him. This was different. This was a mistake born of vulnerability, not intrusion. "It's okay," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Really, no harm done." But Chloe, in that utterly unfiltered way of children, tilted her head and asked the question that would change everything. "How does your stick tell you where to go? Does it talk?" Alina, still flustered, took a breath. In her world, adults either overcorrected with clumsy help or averted their gaze entirely. They didn't have small children ask direct, innocent questions. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips. "No, it doesn't talk, it taps. And I listen to what it tells me about the ground. But sometimes," she admitted, "I get the message wrong." David found himself speaking before he could think. "We were just going for pancakes. You're welcome to join us if you'd like. Seems like you could use a less stressful guide for a few blocks." The offer hung in the air, absurd and generous. A stranger inviting another stranger to breakfast based on a mistaken touch. Alina, who planned every move, stood at the curb with a canceled routine and an empty morning ahead. The quiet of her apartment suddenly seemed less like independence and more like isolation. She made a decision that defied every careful protocol. "Okay," she said. "Yes, thank you." And as the three of them, the blind woman, the single dad, and the curious little girl, walked together toward the diner, none of them could have imagined that a simple question about a white cane was about to unravel the carefully constructed walls around all their hearts, setting in motion a chain of events that would force them to confront a terrifying truth. Sometimes, being found begins the moment you get lost. The walk to the griddle was a slow, quiet procession of three people navigating more than just city blocks. David matched Alina's pace, offering brief, clear cues: curb up, step left, the way he'd read you should. Chloe held Alina's free hand, her small fingers tucked trustingly around the woman's, chattering a stream of consciousness guide about a pink flower in a window box and a very fat pigeon. Alina, for her part, moved with a focused grace, her cane whispering against the pavement, a slight smile on her face at Chloe's narration. Inside the diner, the Saturday morning roar of clattering plates and overlapping conversations hit them like a wall. David guided them to a recently vacated booth, the red vinyl still warm. The awkwardness descended as they slid in. David and Chloe on one side, Alina on the other, her cane leaning against the wall. A silence stretched, filled only by the diner's chaos. David realized he had no script for this. "So, pancakes are the specialty," he offered, cringing internally. But Chloe, the diplomat of the mundane, leaned across the table. Do you like chocolate chips in yours? I do, but Daddy says I have to eat some blueberry ones too for vitamins. She made air quotes with a solemnity that broke the tension. Elena laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. I am firmly on Team Chocolate Chip. Vitamins are overrated before noon. David watched, fascinated as Chloe became Elena's eyes, describing the dizzying pattern on the laminate table, the grumpy-looking cook flipping pancakes behind the counter, the wobble of their waitress's enormous bun. Elena listened, her head tilted, as if constructing the scene from sound and description alone. When the waitress came, David ordered for them all, a short stack for Elena, chocolate chip for Chloe, blueberry for himself, feeling a strange, domestic normalcy settle over the bizarre situation. The food arrived, and a new challenge presented itself. David watched as Elena's fingers located the edge of her plate, the fork, the syrup bottle. She moved with methodical precision, but pouring syrup onto a specific spot on an invisible plate was a task of faith and estimation. Without a word, Chloe slid out of the booth, walked around the table and climbed up next to Elena. Can I help? I'm a very good pourer. David held his breath. Chloe, honey, maybe Elena wants to. It's okay, Elena interrupted softly. She placed her hand gently over Chloe's small one on the syrup bottle. Right here in the middle is perfect, just a little. Together they poured. Not a drop was spilled. Chloe beamed, a look of profound accomplishment on her face. In that simple, collaborative act, something fundamental shifted. The stranger at the table became a person Chloe was helping. The protective wall David had built around their twosome developed a door. Over sticky pancakes, the conversation found its rhythm. Elena explained how the white cane worked, not as a magical talking stick, but as a tool that transferred information through vibration and sound. It tells me about texture, she said, tapping her fork gently on the table. Concrete, grass, metal, grate. It finds obstacles before my toes do, but it can't find people. People are quiet and they move. Is it scary? Chloe asked, syrup on her chin. Sometimes, Elena admitted, and the honesty was disarming. Mostly when it's loud like this. Sound is my map. When the map gets blurry, I get lost. David, emboldened, asked about her work. She transcribed musical scores into Braille for the conservatory, a job that required an extraordinary musical ear and tactile memory. She described translating the fluid lines of a violin concerto into the raised dots of Braille notation, a language of patterns she could feel. It was a world of artistry and intellect David had never considered. In turn, David found himself talking about the divorce. Not the painful details, but the logistics, the shared custody calendar on his phone, the challenge of making Wednesday night dinners feel special, the weird silence of a home built for four now occupied by one. He mentioned he was a graphic designer, and Elena immediately asked about the relationship between visual design and user experience for the visually impaired. It was a sharp, insightful question that moved past pity to professional curiosity. They talked for an hour. The check came, and with it the looming end. David paid, feeling a pang of something like loss. They walked back to the original crosswalk, the silence now comfortable. When they reached the corner, Elena turned to them. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. For the pancakes, for the guide service, for not making it weird. Chloe threw her arms around Elena's waist in a sudden, fierce hug. Bye, Elena. I hope your stick doesn't get the wrong message again. Elena hugged her back, clearly startled but touched. She extended a hand toward David. He took it, not in a handshake, but holding it for a moment. It was really nice to meet you, David, truly. You too, Elena, he paused. We're here most Saturdays, same time if you ever want. He trailed off, not wanting to presume, not wanting to sound like he was offering charity. Elena smiled, a beautiful, unguarded smile. I'll keep that in mind. And then she tapped her cane, oriented herself, and merged back into the flow of pedestrians. a solitary figure once more. In the car driving to Sarah's, Chloe was uncharacteristically quiet. Then she said, "I like her, she's smart, and she didn't talk to me like I was a baby." "I liked her too, Bug," David said, his mind replaying the morning. "Will we see her again?" "I don't know, sweetheart. The city's a big place." But the following Saturday, as David and Chloe slid into their usual booth at the griddle, he found himself scanning the room. A ridiculous hope, he told himself. Yet, when the diner door opened 10 minutes later and Alina stood there, cane in hand, a hesitant smile on her face as the hostess pointed toward their booth, David's heart did a funny little flip. This time, there was no awkwardness. Chloe waved her over with both arms. Alina navigated to the table and slid in across from them as if she'd been doing it for years. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, a playful note in her voice. "Liar," Chloe sang happily. "You came to see us." Thus, a ritual was born. Every other Saturday, Alina joined them for breakfast. David learned she was 28, had lost her sight gradually over 2 years, and that her family lived across the country. She learned he was 34, that his ex-wife Sarah was a driven corporate lawyer, and that he felt most like himself when he was drawing with Chloe on the living room floor. The conversations deepened. Alina confessed that social isolation was the hardest part of her blindness. "People don't know how to talk to me," she said one morning, stirring her coffee. "They either talk to David about me like I'm not here, or they use this loud, slow voice. You two just talk." David, in turn, shared his fear of failing Chloe, of not being enough to make up for a broken home. "The statistics say kids from split homes are resilient," he said. "But I see her trying to piece it all together, and I just want to give her a stable picture." One rainy Saturday, they stayed for 3 hours. Chloe, bored of coloring, asked Alina about music. Alina's face lit up. She pulled out her phone, connected to a small Bluetooth speaker she carried, and played a piece she was transcribing, a haunting cello suite. She placed Chloe's small hand on the speaker. "Feel that?" she whispered. "That low vibration, that's the cello's soul." Chloe closed her eyes, feeling the music in her fingertips, a look of wonder on her face. David watched them, a profound ache of gratitude and something else, something warmer and more terrifying, settling in his chest. He started texting Alina during the week. Silly things. A photo of a disastrous cake Chloe tried to bake, a link to an article about accessible design. Alina would respond with a voice memo describing the sound of rain on her skylight, or a Braille pun that was so bad it made him laugh out loud at his desk. The space between Saturdays began to fill with her presence. One Wednesday evening, after a particularly exhausting day of daycare mishaps and client revisions, David's phone buzzed. It was Alina, a voice memo. He pressed play and her voice, warm and close, filled his quiet apartment. "Hey, Chloe mentioned her swimming lesson is tomorrow. I remember you said she's scared of putting her face under. Tell her the water just wants to hold her. It's not a fight, it's a hug. That's what my O&M instructor told me about crossing a scary street. Sometimes you just have to trust the space to hold you." David saved the memo. He played it for Chloe before her lesson. The next day, Chloe put her face under the water for the first time. The lines were blurring beautifully and irreversibly. David was falling for Alina. He knew it with the same certainty he knew his daughter's laugh. He loved her sharp mind, her resilient spirit, the way she navigated a world not built for her with humor and grit. He loved how she treated Chloe as a whole person. But the fear was a cold companion. Was it too soon after his divorce? Was it fair to Chloe to introduce someone new, someone with unique challenges? Was he subconsciously seeking someone who needed him, to fill the hole Sarah left? For Alina, the fear was a roaring waterfall. Letting David and Chloe in felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Every person she'd allowed herself to depend on since losing her sight had eventually faded away. Friends who found her mobility needs inconvenient. A boyfriend who couldn't handle the stairs. The research was clear. Social isolation was a rampant, silent side effect of disability. David and Chloe weren't just company. They were a lifeline to the world of casual, joyful connection she thought she'd lost. But to love them meant making herself astronomically vulnerable. It meant trusting that she wouldn't become a burden, that her blindness wouldn't be a problem to be solved. The unspoken tension between them grew, a third presence at the breakfast table. It was in the way David's hand would linger when he helped her with her coat, in the way Alina would turn her head to look at him when he spoke, as if memorizing the sound of his voice. The breaking point came on a bright Saturday in June. Breakfast had been particularly lively. Chloe was now fully in the role of Alina's visual narrator, describing everything in intricate detail. As they prepared to leave, Chloe, in a moment of pure, unself-conscious affection, climbed onto the booth seat and kissed Alina on the cheek. "I love you, Alina," she declared. The words hung in the air, simple and devastatingly true. Alina's breath caught. She reached out, found Chloe's face, and cupped it gently. "I love you too, Chloe Bug." David's vision blurred. In that moment, he made a decision. As they walked Alina to her bus stop, he said, "We're going to the Botanic Garden Sunday. They have a sensory trail, plants you're supposed to touch and smell. Chloe thought, we thought you might like it." It was an invitation beyond Saturday, into their weekend, into their family time. Alina froze. The sensory garden sounded like a slice of heaven, but it was a step, a big one. The fear rose in her throat, choking. She heard herself say, "I can't, I'm busy Sunday." The lie was flimsy, transparent. David's face fell. "Oh, okay, maybe another time." The following week, Alina canceled Saturday breakfast. A last-minute work thing, she texted. The week after, she was distant, leaving early with a headache. The warm, easy connection had been replaced by a polite, panicked retreat. David was hurt and confused. Chloe asked about her constantly, her little face growing more disappointed each time he said, "She's just busy, sweetheart." The lifeline was slipping away, and David realized with a jolt of panic that he couldn't let it go. He couldn't return to the grayscale world before Alina. But to pull her back, he would have to confront the very thing she was running from, and in doing so, risk losing everything he just found. The silence from Alina stretched into a full week, then two. For David, the absence felt like a phantom limb, a constant, aching reminder of something vital that was no longer there. He sent careful texts, "Hope you're okay. Chloe misses you." The replies were brief, polite walls of text. "I'm fine, just swamped. Give Chloe a hug from me." The warmth was gone, replaced by the chill of formal distance. At their next Saturday breakfast, Chloe sat glumly pushing chocolate chips around her plate. "She's not coming back, is she?" she asked, her voice small. David didn't have an answer. The fear he'd tried to ignore now roared to the surface. Had he moved too fast, scared her off? Was his burgeoning family just another obligation she felt she couldn't handle? The statistics on social isolation for adults with disabilities flashed in his mind, a dry, academic fact that now felt like a personal indictment. He had become part of the problem she feared. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans to escalate the conflict. It began with Sarah. During a Wednesday evening handoff, Chloe, in a burst of frustrated tears, blurted out, "I want Alina. I don't want to go to dinner, I want pancakes with Alina." Sarah, sharp as ever, immediately picked up on the new name. Later that night, David's phone rang. It was Sarah, and her tone was all business. "Who's Alina?" she asked, bypassing hello. David explained, as calmly as he could, about the woman they'd met, the Saturday breakfasts, the friendship. "A blind woman you picked up at a crosswalk." Sarah's voice was icy with disbelief. "David, what were you thinking? Bringing a complete stranger, a vulnerable stranger no less, into our daughter's life?" "She's not vulnerable, she's incredibly capable," David shot back, but the defensive edge in his voice betrayed him. "And Chloe adores her. She's been nothing but wonderful." "That's not the point. The point is you didn't consult me. We have joint legal custody. Introducing a new, potentially permanent adult into Chloe's routine is a decision we make together." I don't know this woman. I don't know her background, her stability, her intentions. For all I know, she's relying on you and by extension, my daughter, for support she can't get elsewhere." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and devastating because it echoed David's own deepest insecurity. Was he, in his loneliness, being taken advantage of? Or worse, was he exploiting Alina's need for connection to feel needed again? "I trust her," David said, but the words felt hollow. "Your trust isn't enough," Sarah stated flatly. "I want to meet her, a proper meeting, and until I do, I'm not comfortable with Chloe spending unsupervised time with her. Saturdays at a public diner are one thing, family outings to gardens are another." The ultimatum was a grenade tossed into the already fragile situation. David couldn't force Alina to meet Sarah, not when she was already in full retreat. To even ask felt like a betrayal. Yet, if he didn't, Sarah could legally challenge their custody arrangement, arguing he was making irresponsible decisions. The peaceful co-parenting détente was shattered. Meanwhile, Alina was spiraling. Isolated in her apartment, the fear had metastasized into a cold certainty. She had let them in too far. She loved them too much. The terror wasn't just of being a burden. It was of the catastrophic loss that would come when she inevitably proved to be one. She imagined scenarios. Chloe getting hurt because Alina couldn't see a hazard, David's career suffering because he had to accommodate her needs. The slow, resentful drift as the novelty of her difference wore off, and the reality of its challenges set in. Her phone buzzed with a message from David, relaying Sarah's demand for a meeting. It was the final confirmation of her fears. She wasn't just a friend. She was now an asterisk problem between co-parents, a source of conflict in Chloe's life. The very thing she never wanted to be. She drafted a dozen responses, each one more final than the last. The one she sent was simple. "I think it's best for everyone if I step back. Please tell Chloe I'll always cherish our breakfasts. Thank you for everything, David." When David read it, it felt like a door slamming shut. This wasn't a retreat, it was a surrender. He called her immediately. She didn't answer. He called again. On the third ring, she picked up, her voice thick with tears. "Alina, please, don't do this. We can figure out the meeting with Sarah. It's just a formality." "It's not a formality, David," she cried, the dam breaking. "It's a referendum on whether I'm fit to be in your daughter's life. And she's right to ask. I'm a complication you don't need. You have a chance to give Chloe a stable, normal life. You and Sarah, you're her parents. You could make it work again for her sake. I've seen the way Chloe talks about her mom. She wants her family back, and I'm in the way." David was stunned. Where is this coming from? Sarah and I are done. We're friends, co-parents, but that's it. There is no getting back together. "Chloe told me," Alina whispered. "The last time we had breakfast. She said her mom was moving back to the neighborhood, that she was looking at houses near her school. She said she asked her mom if you could all live together again." The revelation hit David like a physical blow. He remembered Chloe mentioning Sarah's move, but he dismissed her childish, wishful thinking. He hadn't realized the depth of her longing, or that she'd shared it with Alina. In that moment, he understood Alina's panic. She wasn't just afraid of being a burden. She was afraid of being the obstacle to a little girl's deepest wish. "Alina, listen to me. Chloe is 6. She wants what every kid wants, a united home. But Sarah and I divorced for reasons that haven't changed. Giving Chloe a happy life doesn't mean forcing her parents back into a marriage that made them miserable. It means surrounding her with people who love her, and that includes you." "But what if I'm not enough? What if I can't be what she needs? What if I fail her?" The raw vulnerability in her voice was heartbreaking. "You won't," David said, his own voice breaking. "You already are what she needs. You show up. You listen. You treat her like a person. That's more than enough." There was a long, shaky silence on the line. "I'm scared, David. I'm so scared of ruining this beautiful thing." "Then be scared with me," he pleaded. "But don't leave. Don't make the choice for us. Let Chloe choose. Let me choose." He heard her take a deep, shuddering breath. "Okay," she said so softly he almost missed it. "Okay, I'll meet Sarah." But the crisis was far from over. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at a neutral cafe. The tension in the air was palpable. Sarah arrived in a sleek pantsuit, every inch the corporate lawyer assessing a risk. Alina arrived with David, her posture straight, her knuckles white where she gripped her cane. Chloe was with a sitter, a deliberate choice. The introductions were painfully polite. Sarah's gaze was analytical, taking in Alina's cane, her sunglasses, the careful way she navigated to the chair David held for her. "Alina, thank you for coming," Sarah began, her tone professional. "I appreciate you being willing to have this conversation. My primary concern, as I'm sure you understand, is Chloe's well-being." "Of course," Alina said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "She's a remarkable child." "She is," Sarah agreed. "And she's become very attached to you very quickly. David tells me you've been joining them for breakfast for several months now." "We have, it's been wonderful for me." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "I need to be blunt. Chloe's life has seen a lot of change. Her stability is my top priority. Your situation, it introduces variables. I'm not questioning your character, but I have to consider Chloe's safety and emotional security. What happens if, for example, you're out with her and there's an emergency? What is your plan?" It was a fair question, but it was delivered like a cross-examination. David started to interject, but Alina placed a hand on his arm. "I have a plan," she said calmly. "I've been blind for nearly a decade, Sarah. I don't navigate the world unprepared. I have emergency protocols, I have apps that can connect me to sighted assistants in seconds, and I have the phone numbers for David, and if you permit it, you, programmed into my phone with distinctive ringtones. But more importantly, I would never put Chloe in a situation I wasn't 100% confident I could handle. My independence isn't recklessness. It's a carefully managed skill." Sarah listened, her expression unreadable. "And your relationship with David, where is that headed?" Alina flushed. "That's a private matter between David and me." "Not when it affects my daughter," Sarah countered. "If this becomes serious and then it ends, Chloe loses another person. She's already lost the family unit she knew. I won't have her heart broken again by an ephemeral attachment." The word ephemeral hung in the air, a cruel dismissal of everything Alina and David felt. David could stay silent no longer. "Sarah, that's enough. Alina isn't an ephemeral attachment. She's important to me, to Chloe. We're not asking for your blessing on our relationship. We're asking you to trust that I, as Chloe's father, am making a good judgment about who is in her life." "Are you?" Sarah asked, turning her sharp gaze on him. "Or are you so lonely and she's so isolated that you've confused need for love?" The question was a nuclear strike, designed to annihilate. It laid bare every insecure thought that had haunted both David and Alina in the dark of night. David saw Alina flinch as if struck. Her face went pale. In that moment, the carefully constructed bridge between their worlds didn't just tremble, it shattered. Alina stood up, her chair scraping loudly. "I think I've heard enough," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Thank you for your time, Sarah. David." And before either could stop her, she turned, found her cane, and walked out of the cafe with a speed and precision that spoke of a desperate need to escape. David stood to go after her, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "David, think. Really think. Is this what's best for Chloe, or is this about fixing what's broken in you?" He looked at his ex-wife, then at the door closing behind Alina. He was trapped between the practical, protective world Sarah represented and the messy, hopeful, terrifying world he had found with Alina. To choose one felt like betraying the other. And in the wreckage of that meeting, a terrible new truth dawned. Sometimes, love isn't enough to overcome the practical, protective fears of those on the outside. Sometimes, the family you choose crashes against the family you have, and something has to give. He had no idea that the choice was about to be ripped from his hands entirely. David didn't go after Alina, not right away. Instead, he turned back to Sarah, the anger in his eyes a cold, quiet fire she had never seen before. "You were deliberately cruel," he said, his voice low and steady. "That wasn't about protecting Chloe. That was about wounding her. And me. We are done having this conversation." He left her sitting there, the bill unpaid, and stepped out into the afternoon sun. He called Alina. It went straight to voicemail. He texted, "Please, let me come over, let me explain." No response. For 3 days there was only silence. The fear that he had lost her for good was a physical weight on his chest. Chloe, sensing his despair, stopped asking about Alina entirely, which hurt more than her questions. On the fourth day, a package arrived at David's apartment. It was addressed to Chloe. Inside was a beautiful hand-bound Braille book. On the first page, in raised print letters, it read, "For Chloe who sees with her heart." The following pages were blank. Attached was a note from Alina in standard print. "I started this for her, a storybook she can feel. I thought she might like to fill it with her own stories too. Please give it to her and tell her I'm sorry." It wasn't a goodbye. It was an offering, a piece of her world given to Chloe. David saw it for what it was, a final gift from a retreating heart. He knew then that he couldn't let fear win, not hers, not Sarah's, not his own. He had to choose, and he had to choose out loud. That Saturday, he and Chloe went to the griddle. He didn't expect Alina to be there. She wasn't, but he did something different. He asked the manager if they could put a small, reserved sign on their usual booth for next Saturday and every Saturday after. He paid a month in advance. The sign read, "Reserved for David, Chloe, and Alina, Saturday Breakfast Club." It was a declaration, a stake driven into the ground of their shared history. He took a picture of the sign and sent it to Alina with one sentence: "The table is yours whenever you're ready. No conditions." The following Wednesday, he requested a formal meeting with Sarah. He brought a folder. Inside was not legal paperwork, but something else. He laid out printouts, articles on the psychological benefits of diverse adult role models for children, studies on how positive interactions with strangers boost well-being, the data on single fatherhood and successful co-parenting. And at the bottom, a handwritten letter from Chloe, phonetically spelled, that read, "I mees Alina, she makas happy. Love, Chloe." "Sarah," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I am not asking for your permission. I am telling you as Chloe's father that Alina is a part of our lives. I have heard your concerns. I take Chloe's safety as seriously as you do. We will have protocols, we will communicate, and Alina will be included in our emergency contacts. But I will not allow your fear or my past loneliness to dictate our future. I love her. Chloe loves her. That is not ephemeral. It is real." Sarah, for once, was silent. She looked at the folder, at their daughter's messy writing. The lawyer in her saw a case she could not win without causing irreparable damage. The mother in her saw her daughter's simple, heartfelt plea. She closed the folder and let out a long breath. "I still have concerns," she said, but the fight was gone from her voice. "But I see that you are committed. Just promise me you'll be careful," with both their hearts. It was the closest to a blessing he would get. Now came the harder task, reaching Alina. He went to the music conservatory, the address he remembered from her stories. He waited outside the building until he heard the familiar, rhythmic tap of her cane on the pavement. She was leaving work, headphones on, her face a mask of focused solitude. "Alina," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She stopped dead, her head tilted, listening. "David." "Yeah, can I walk with you?" She nodded, mute. They fell into step, her cane tapping, his footsteps a steady counter-rhythm. He didn't try to take her arm. "I got the book for Chloe," he began. "It's beautiful. She sleeps with it. She says the blank pages feel like possibility." Alina's steps faltered. "I shouldn't have run, I'm sorry. What Sarah said, it just confirmed everything I was afraid of." "I know, and she was wrong. So wrong it took me a few days to see past my own anger." He stopped walking, turning to face her though she couldn't see him. "Alina, I'm not with you because I'm lonely or because I need to be needed. I'm with you because when I'm with you, the world makes more sense. You make me a better father because you remind me to listen, not just look. You make Chloe feel heard in a way even I can't. That's not need. That's love. and I am choosing it. I have already chosen it. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, flat object wrapped in cloth. He took her hand and placed it in her palm. It was a new, sleek digital audio recorder. I got this for your work, but also, he pressed the play button. Chloe's voice, bright and clear, filled the space between them. Hi, Alina. Daddy said I could record a story for you. This is a story about a girl and a magic cane. The cane didn't help the girl see, it helped other people hear. The end. I love you. Come home. Alina's free hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping. She said home, she whispered. Yes, David said, his own eyes wet. Our home. However we build it, with protocols and meetings with Sarah and all the complications. We want to build it with you. The wall around Alina's heart, built brick by brick from fear and loss, crumbled in that instant. She let out a shuddering breath, then another, leaning into him. He held her, there on the sidewalk, as she cried tears of relief, of terror, of hope. Okay, she said into his shoulder. Okay, I choose it too. I choose you. I choose Chloe. I'm still scared. Me too, David said, holding her tighter. We'll be scared together. The following Saturday, Alina was waiting at their booth when David and Chloe arrived. Chloe let out a shriek of joy that turned every head in the diner and launched herself into Alina's arms. The reserved sign sat proudly on the table. It was a new beginning, built on the rubble of the old. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. They were better, they were real. Sarah and Alina had several more strained, then gradually civil conversations. They established rules, check-in texts when Alina had Chloe, a shared calendar, open dialogue. Sarah, to her credit, tried. She invited Alina to Chloe's school play, saving her a seat at the end of a row for easy access. It was a small gesture, but it was a start. David and Alina navigated the practicalities. He learned to describe visual worlds in rich, sensory detail, not just for navigation but for sharing beauty. She taught him to listen, to the emotion in a silence, to the truth in a pause. They fought sometimes about petty things and profound ones, but they learned to fight clean, to state their fears without using them as weapons. Chloe thrived. She became, in her own words, a dual-sensory observer. She would describe scenes to Alina with the precision of a documentary filmmaker, and then turn to David and explain the emotional subtext she detected. The blank Braille book slowly filled with stories she dictated, which Alina transcribed in raised dots. It was titled The Accidental Family. A year after the disastrous meeting, David took Alina back to the crosswalk where they met. He got down on one knee on the busy sidewalk, the city swirling around them. He didn't have a ring. Instead, he placed a small, cold metal object in her hand. It was a key. Alina, he said, his voice steady, my home is your home, my heart is your heart. My daughter adores you. Will you move in with us, officially, permanently? Alina, laughing through tears, felt the key's teeth, its unique shape. Is this a metaphor? Because I can't drive. It's the key to our apartment, to our life. Say yes. Yes, she said, pulling him up and kissing him as the pedestrian signal chirped and the crowd flowed around them. 1,000 times yes. The final surprising detail came 6 months later. Alina, using her skills in Braille transcription and her deep understanding of sensory experience, began collaborating with David on a project. They developed a prototype for a children's book series that was fully inclusive, with lush illustrations for sighted readers, Braille text, and touch-activated sound modules that described the images and played ambient story sounds. They pitched it to a publisher specializing in accessible media. The project was accepted. The first book was dedicated to Chloe, who taught us that every story is better when it's felt. On a bright Saturday morning, 3 years after the accidental touch, David sat at their booth at the griddle. Chloe, now 9, was explaining the physics of pancake bubbles to Alina, who listened with a smile, her hand resting on David's arm. Sarah walked in, joining them for a rare weekend coffee. The conversation was easy, filled with updates about school and work. Looking at them, The blind woman, the single father, the ex-wife, and the extraordinary child who connected them all, David understood the transformation. The chain of events that began with a mistake didn't just create a couple, it expanded a family. It taught them that love isn't about finding someone who completes you, but about choosing someone who challenges you to grow and having the courage to make space for them, exactly as they are. The accidental touch didn't fix their broken pieces. It showed them how to build something new and stronger from the fragments. They had answered the terrifying question posed at the crosswalk. What happens now? You build a life together. And sometimes the most direct route to where you're meant to be is through getting beautifully, wonderfully lost. So what does this story, born from a single moment of confusion, actually tell us? It tells us that connection isn't always a choice we make with clear eyes. Sometimes, it's an accident we have to choose to embrace with our whole hearts. Elena, David, and Chloe didn't find each other because they were looking. They found each other because, for a split second, they were lost. And in that shared vulnerability, they built a compass. We live in a world that often mistakes sight for vision and independence for isolation. Elena's white cane was a tool for navigation, but it was also a social barrier, a signal that many people, uncomfortable or uncertain, chose to ignore. David's status as a single father came with its own invisible script, a pressure to provide a perfect, uncomplicated life. Their story challenges the very definitions of strength and need. True strength isn't the absence of need. It's the courage to admit it and the wisdom to accept help when it's offered in the spirit of partnership, not pity. The research we touched on earlier proves the science behind the magic. Those brief, positive interactions with strangers are not just pleasant distractions. They are fundamental to our well-being. They knit us into the social fabric, reminding us we belong. Elena, David, and Chloe took a micro moment and stretched it into a lifetime. They demonstrate that family is less about shared biology and more about shared commitment. It's a choice to show up day after day and say, your reality is part of my reality. Your challenges are our challenges. Your joy is my joy. Their journey answers a silent question many carry. In a world that can feel cold and transactional, are profound, transformative connections still possible? The answer, etched in pancake syrup and braille pages and a reserved diner booth, is a resounding yes. But they require something of us. They require us to release our white-knuckle grip on the lives we planned, to make space at our tables, both literal and figurative, for the beautiful, chaotic, unexpected guest. The next time you're in a crowded place, surrounded by the quiet loneliness of a city, remember this. The person next to you is navigating a story you know nothing about. A simple act of noticing, a moment of shared humanity, might not rewrite your life as dramatically as it did for them, but it could. And even if it doesn't, it will still make the world feel warmer, softer, and more connected. That is never a small thing. If this story of accidental love and chosen family resonated with you, if it reminded you of the unexpected ways we find our people, then hit that subscribe button. We explore more tales like this every week, stories that prove the most extraordinary moments are often hidden in the most ordinary corners of our lives. Thank you for listening.